This is the game that gets me to 1600 rating. If you study the tactics and strategies that take place in this game, I believe that you too can make it to 1600 one day. This game is against Sergei Melnik, from Ukraine, and starts with the moves e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and finally d4, bringing us to the Scotch game, one of my favorite openings in the game. He captures on d4, so I choose to play the Scotch gambit with bishop c4, which is full of sneaky tricks that usually works on 1200 and below rated players, but is much harder to pull off at this level. He plays h6 to prevent my knight from going to g5, and I choose to trade everything to create center control. Knight x d4, knight x d4, queen x d4. He doesn't like my powerful center and attempts to dislodge the queen with f6. I choose to accept, queen x, f6, knight x f6. I notice my pawn is hanging, so play knight c3 to defend while also bringing my knight into the game. It is important to play as many multifunctional moves as you can, like the one I just played, as moves that only achieve one thing all the time is simply not enough at the high level, and you will always get beat by a player who has more useful moves. He plays d6, which isn't the greatest as it blocks his dark squared bishop's line of sight, but it does open up his light squared bishop, which is good. I castle to guarantee my king's safety. And he plays bishop e7, most likely looking to castle soon. h3 is played to create an escape square for my king in case there are any back rank checks in the future. This move of h3 also prevents his knight from infiltrating to g4. He castles short, and I play bishop f4, putting it on a much stronger square. He plays pawn c6, perhaps looking to kick out my bishop in the future, and I simply slide my f-rook to e1 to activate it. Bishop e6 is played, and I decide to trade as I do not want to give up the strong diagonals that our bishops are on. If I can't have it, no one can. Bishop x e6, pawn x e6, I push my e pawn in an attempt to give him an isolated e pawn, and it works, pawn x e5, bishop x e5. He slides to bishop b4, attempting to double my pawns. I quickly see this and play rook e3, to capture his bishop if he captures my knight. He protects his isolated pawn with f-rook e8, and I try to kick out his bishop with a3. He counterattacks with bishop c5, a great move. I retreat to e2. He plays knight d5, putting his knight on an extremely powerful square, and I play rook e1, doubling up on my rooks. And he plays king f7 to add a defender to the e6 pawn. It is important to note that the king can be used as an asset, however should not be overused as it is an immense target for the opponent and can quickly go bad for you. I also place my knight on a powerful square with knight e4, attacking his dark squared bishop, and he plays the logical move of bishop b6. However, this move is a major blunder. Can you find why? That's right, the move that makes white completely winning is knight d6. This attacks both the king and the rook, as it is called a fork in the game of chess. Black must move out of the way, and I am able to capture his rook with ease. Black captures back with rook x e8. However, black is completely losing as rooks are much more valuable than knights are, and I am up a whole 4.3 points on the evaluation bar. At the time I thought it was a good idea to simply trade a bishop for 2 pawns, so I play bishop g7. This is clearly the wrong idea, as bishops are far superior compared to pawns, especially in the endgame, and now the game is pretty much even again. Black captures king g7. And I take on e6. We then trade rooks, and we are left with a rook against a bishop and a knight in the endgame. He marches forward with a5, and I annoy his knight with c4. It is important to calculate where the knight can move, since knights can be unpredictable in the endgame as there is so much space for them to roam. He counterattacks with f4. I calculated for this move and check his king, ultimately forking his pawn and his king. His king dodges to g6, and I gobble his b7 pawn. He attempts to put pressure on my b2 pawn with bishop d4, however I can play b5 to bypass any threats. We then trade pawns, and he plays knight d3, again, putting pressure on my pawn while simultaneously attacking my f2 pawn. I realize this threat but simply ignore it, since I realize that at least one of my pawns will be able to be promoted soon, and then I will be unstoppable. Thus, I continue forward with b5, and he captures with knight x f2. I take on c6, and he has a discovered attack with knight e4. Fortunately, his knight is not attacking anything, so I can simply move to f1 without losing any material whatsoever. He continues his weak attacks with knight d6, and I counterattack with rook d7. It is clear to see just how powerful rooks can be compared to minor pieces. Bishop c5 is played to defend, but I just keep on moving forward with pawn c7, placing me only one square away from promotion. He tries to get his king in on the action, however it is just too little too late, as I calculate that I can trade pieces and promote my pawn with rook x d6, bishop x d6, and c8 equals queen. Then after a few moves, black resigns as white is just too powerful, and I am overwhelmed with joy as I am now 1600. One important key play is on move 20, when the bishop moves back to b6, as it allows my knight to go to d6 and win a rook. The best move for black in this position would have been bishop e7, as it allows his bishop to see over 9 squares, which is extremely powerful for a bishop. The next key play occurs shortly after and is when I make the mistake of bishop g7, as it simply gives up a powerful piece for basically no reason whatsoever. I thought simplifying when you're up on material is always a good idea, however I was clearly wrong, as this was not a trade, but a loss on material for white. According to the engine, the best move is pawn c4, as it forces his powerful knight to retreat. Here are some of the stats for the game. Please let me know if you have any questions about the game or questions in general. I will be sure to respond.